On the podcast today, we're going to speak about the second chapter of the Tao Te Ching, which is the second episode in this series, the 81 Meditations of the Tao Te Ching. And the second chapter gets into the interplay of opposites and also the amorality of Taoism, which a lot of people, get triggered about because, obviously Westerners who come across, especially Eastern spirituality, and specifically Taoism, they think that things have to be moralistic, and they don't understand the Taoist point of view, but we will talk about that today. And so, to get into it, again, we're using the Jia Fu Feng and Jane English translation here. And so I'll read to you the second chapter of the Tao Te Ching and just a couple of other sentences by Jia Fu Feng about this chapter. Under heaven, all can see beauty as beauty only because there is ugliness. All can know good as good only because there is evil. Therefore, having and not having arise together. Difficult and easy complement each other. Long and short contrast each other. High and low rest upon each other. Voice and sound harmonize each other. Front and back follow each other. Therefore, the wise go about doing nothing, teaching no talking. The 10,000 things rise and fall without cease, creating yet not possessing, working yet not taking credit. Work is done, then forgotten. Therefore, it lasts forever. Now, just a couple of pointers for people before we get into this by Jia Fu Feng, where he says, every force evokes and depends upon a counterforce. And then he goes on further. The wise understand all of life amid the let's go from there. The wise understand all of life amid the 10,000 things as basically a play of forces. Moral teachings that attempt to break the complementary relation of good and evil are doomed to failure and breed violence to others and to oneself. This teaching is an essential aspect of the doctrine that has, in the Western world, often been condemned as heretical or dangerous. It is always a difficult, hidden, and subtle doctrine, easily misunderstood as justifying self-indulgence and even cruelty. And that's the lack of understanding from Westerners of what this means. And this sort of teaching is usually isolated to people, like if we look at it from Judaism and Islam, who have done a lot of moral discipline in the exoteric field, and the esoteric teachings, like in Sufism and the esoteric teachings in Judaism. Usually these teachings are left for those people. But as we see with the Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu gets us out of the way pretty much straight away in the second chapter. So
yeah, and the concept of amorality under Taoism is still very foreign to a lot of people, I think. And people may have a strong pull towards the Taoism, especially Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu's teaching in general. But amorality is such a very foreign concept, I think.
Well, it's especially because a lot of spiritual teachings, even some Eastern spiritual teachings, right, have moral disciplines, and they have certain set of ethics that one should follow. And you could say that that's all well and good. And it's not to say that Lao Tzu and Zhuangzi are against morality. It's about setting up systems of belief of morality that tend to warp our nature. As Jia Fu Feng said there, as soon as you seek to destroy the opposite, that's when you create more trouble. So if you don't understand the interplay of opposites in the world, the yin and yang energies of the universe, then you will think that there can be this universal good, and evil or bad people won't exist, so to speak. You know what I mean? But when you understand from a higher perspective, you understand that this is just the interplay of those two fundamental forces in action.
Yeah, it's very important, first and foremost, to understand manifested world and unmanifested world. Yeah, so obviously a lot of people in the world only see the world as it looks, right? Just a physical world, what we can physically see, right? And that counted as just a world in general for a lot of people. So that's to say it's manifested world, right? And that in that manifested world, there are so many things, and it's very diverse. So that, like in the first chapter, it says how 10,000 things come about, right? The manifested world is the 10,000 things. So that if you have a strong belief on this world, this manifested world is the only world that exists, right? That conflict between one another in between 10,000 or more things is kind of inevitable. That's lack of understanding to see high above.
Yes. Well, that's what they say in the second chapter, right? The 10,000 things arise and fall without cease. It's just, that's the nature of the manifest world. It's just coming and going, they're coming and going. People are coming and going, everything's coming and going, right? And according to like the yugas, the universe is eventually coming and going as well. So, you know, you have that element of this coming and going, of this impermanence of the universe, and there needs to be a deeper understanding of that, instead of like, you know, we have a kind of temperament of like permanence in our mind because we think that we're going to live forever, we think that the universe is going to be around forever, we think that a president's going to be around forever, we think a certain situation is going to be that way forever, and it's not. It inevitably changes. And to have that elevated perspective is to understand the law of change. And the law of change is the interplay of opposites. It's just constantly moving around. The dance of yin and yang is constantly happening within the universe.
That levels of higher perspective, it's such detrimental to understand the whole trouble in the world in general, right? Otherwise, we have a lot of problems in the world. We believe that there are a lot of problems that try to prove you're right, or some other person is wrong, or the other way around, all these things. And in the end, like you said, it's just part of interplay. And we need to kind of rise above to be able to see it. Once you have a heightened perspective, it's just kind of play, just like a wave in the ocean. Yeah. It comes and goes. It's like it's gonna be ridiculous to say that wave coming in is better than wave going out. Yeah. Right? There's no such thing. It's just a nature. That's what it does. Yeah. So is a human life as well, and that's what we need to understand.
Yeah, if you create a YouTube channel, you need to expect trolls in the comment section. You need to expect idiotic comments, right? If you're going to create a YouTube channel or something like that, that's part of the interplay. It's part of like, there will always be someone who won't exactly see it your way, or they're at a certain level of understanding, or maybe they have a low IQ or something, and they see it that way. And you have to accept that, because that's part of it. The problem is when you get really angry about that and get triggered by those sorts of things, and then the next minute, then you're caught into, like what Jia Fu Feng said, you're caught into trying to just make the good without the bad. And I'm using that just as a brief analogy here, but that's kind of how we're going about with our world, right? We're setting up a moral disposition within everyone's mind where there should be a certain way of behavior about how things are, and we need to have a set of beliefs. And let's be frank, in the Western world, those set of moral beliefs are based on Christianity. Even if you're an atheist, your set of moralistic beliefs are subtly influenced by Christianity. And Lao Tzu, he doesn't even throw a spanner in the works here, because we're talking about Taoism, which is a lot older than Christianity. He's saying that the natural way, the natural path, we naturally are moralistic. We don't need a set of beliefs. So we're naturally good deep down. We're fundamentally good, as Mencius says, right? And in the Mongsa text, we are fundamentally good. And he uses the analogy of the boy in the well. You know, if we all see a boy playing near the edge of a well and he's about to fall in, we all have an impulse to save the boy, like that deep feeling inside. You don't have to teach that. It's something you innately have within yourself. And that's what Lao Tzu's leaning into. He's like, all you idiots, and he's specifically targeting Confucianism here, all of you idiots going around trying to, especially Confucius, trying to create this Confucian morality for people is actually destroying people's nature as opposed to allowing them naturally to be, in harmony with nature, which coincidentally doesn't lead to a lot of violence and so forth and so on, because you have a deeper understanding that you're part of something much greater, you're just part of nature, and you understand that there is this interplay of opposites, so forth and so on, right? Like they talk about, actually, in the Zhuangzi text, in the Robert Zhe chapter, Robert Zhe explains to Confucius the time of Shen Nung. Shen Nung was an older age, and he was saying, like, in the age of Shen Nung, everything was all shanti, but he used some pretty crude terminology. Not crude, I shouldn't say. Like to articulate it, he kind of said, sons and daughters knew their mother but did not know their father, and so forth and so on. So there was like this natural. He's not saying it, but he's trying to articulate that it was a natural world, like, where we didn't govern each other, but everyone loved and respected each other without the need of rules or regulations.
Yes, a lot of people may believe that otherwise, just like how Xunzi and Confucius did. They believe the human nature is innately bad, right? But I'm much more with the Manchester's perspective. How he explained the Ox Mountain, right? There's that barren mountain in the village, and this person says, "Oh, look how ugly the Ox Mountain is," and the other person who was with that person saying, "Oh, it's not mountain that's ugly. There's a village people go up to the mountain to get whatever need and cut down the trees and pull all the plants they want and this and that." So it became barren like that over time. So that is to say that Ox Mountain was innately beautiful, but it was warped because of the environment that they were in, right? Yeah. So that's exactly how I think the human nature can be explained as well. That I believe, like you said with the boy in a well story, that we have that good nature innately from birth, and that's given to all of human beings, I believe. And we somehow got into this different life circumstance or upbringing or environment, whatever you're in, wherever you're in, or society, so on, and culture. All these things affect you directly or indirectly, and that kind of warps your nature somewhat, and you stop believing on people and stop trusting things, right? Then if you stay that way for far too long, you believe that is part of your nature, but actually it's not.
Yeah, that's it. Like the Ox Mountain analogy is a great one, isn't it? Because like it's the environment that it's in. It's not so much that it doesn't have a bad nature. It was beautiful before it. And then people were grazing, the grass and so forth and so on, and then you end up with what you have. It's a barren thing, and that's the Taoist perspective, right? Is we're innately good until socialization comes in, and when socialization comes in, then our nature begins to be warped, and we all sort of, you can tell this, right? Because like when you look in the eyes of a young child. They don't have any hate or anything inside them. It doesn't exist. I've never seen a baby like mischievous at like 3 years old, like trying
born with full of anger, envy, and jealousy.
It's learned. See, it's learned, and that's what Taoism's point is. And so Lao Tzu flips everything on its head, saying that the self-cultivation model of society, he's using Confucius here, the self-cultivation model itself is wrong, because your starting place is that Confucius believes that humans are innately beasts and we need cultivation. But Lao Tzu's perspective is that we're not beasts. And so we don't need cultivation. We need less cultivation to understand our nature more. And this is an important perspective, especially for people who practice spiritual practice, because a lot of people who practice spiritual practice get into this moralistic disposition where they just got to practice. Like, I've got to cultivate. And there's a time for that, but it's not for all the time. And if you understand Taoism, it's actually counterproductive to do that all the time. And that's just talking about spiritual practice. But talking about life in general, if you're cultivating, like all societies, right, try to cultivate your mentality according to their culture and according to like how society functions, right? You had different cultivation methods and career as I had in Australia, and likewise anyone else around the world, that they have their own different socialization.
Yeah.
And so you have to, in some sense, you have to unravel and unwrap all that nonsense to come back to what Lao Tzu's talking about. And that's where you begin to understand amorality and this and that, and understand actually that morality itself is immoral, because you understand that the socialization and self-cultivation model that most societies fall into is fundamentally based on a wrong, like the perspective is wrong at the beginning. That's what needs to be understood. And that's, again, comes down to the old philosophy of the unhewn wood versus the carving and polishing metaphor of Confucius. So we have the unhewn wood or the uncarved block of Lao Tzu. He's saying stick to the natural, stick to the raw. Or you have the Confucian model of the carving and polishing, and you got this really nice bit of furniture maybe. And Lao Tzu's like, no, you stick to the raw stuff. You stick to the real nature. And actually, all of your spiritual practice or anything that you're trying to unravel from society, if you're studying spiritual philosophy or something, is to get back to that raw nature. It's not to have this carved and polished mentality, because we all have that anyway, because we've gone through socialization.
Yeah. What we need to definitely look more thoroughly into is that having a strong moral society is to separate what's good and bad. The stronger the morality becomes, the stronger that this separate becomes.
Yes.
And that's, therefore, morality itself is, contradicting here, but morality itself is very immoral, because there is that big separation between what's been judged as good or bad, right? So that if you were to raise a child under that kind of strict moral society, then the child become an adult might suffer from strong, like a psychological confusion within, conflict within oneself and the outside world, right? And like, again, perfect example in Far Eastern Asian countries, especially Korea, where I am from, is that like I myself was raised as very restricted, kind of moral family. It's not like you were born Korean, so you act accordingly. It's not like that. It's just culture in general is like that. It's already given. Kind of, you don't have an option. It's a culture. So that everyone follows basically the Confucian way. And everybody believes that is the right way and that is the only way, right? But what that creates in the long term is to have biggest conflict between generation to generation, and then bring up such really selfish people. We're talking selfish and cold indifference type. Like you have no empathy to other people. They try to do good for their family and parents only because they feel obliged to. Right. This is it's a kind of abusive for people's life, and that is a kind of very bad side effect of having strong moral culture.
Well, that's why in the Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu says that when you set up models of flower piety, that in itself creates a sort of like an attitude where the children have kind of like, they're not as supportive of their parents as what it appears. They're just doing that because they're obliged. They feel obliged. It's part of the system, where he's saying that flower piety is naturally there without being told to do it. Like, 'cause naturally we all love our parents, right? Like, we don't have to be told to love your parents. Our parents can do all sorts of bad things to us, but we still innately love our parents because there's that genetic connection. But you don't need a model or a set system to say that you should be good to your parents. Now, I'm not saying here that say if your parents are abusive to you and you're you're a son or a daughter, then you need to have a healthy distance, obviously, from your parents.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? But in general, I'm talking here. This is in general. So, and that's the part of the problem, right? So you have, like in Korea, you have a set culture where you have, ways that you're supposed to behave in society, but it's very, like you said, it's almost hypocritical, and that's what a lot about what this chapter is about too. It's about exposing the moral hypocrite as well, because Korea is a good example, right? Like this moral hypocrisy is rife in Korea because people are pretending to be a certain way. Even parents here, we know this firsthand, and they, behind closed doors, are completely different than what they show on the surface. And this is again what Lao Tzu is saying. Like, if you set up a set of moral ethics for people, they'll often, because of their nature, they'll push back on this, maybe privately, or sometimes out in the open they'll push back on this, because it's not in accord with nature. It's an external system that's been imposed on someone, and any external system imposed on someone is not natural, and so that's part of the problem, and that's where the moral hypocrite is born. And that's why, especially in the Zhuangzi text, a lot of the text is about exposing Confucius as being a moral hypocrite, because he himself is trying to create this morality, but his actions are hypocritical because even he himself can't even fall in line with his own teachings. You know what I mean? Like, because they're just too outrageous.
Yeah. The standard is way too high. It's inhumane, actually.
It's inhumane, yes. And that's actually, if we take a step back from Confucianism and look at the world in general, we've created these inhumane standards in society.
The very strong moral-based Confucian culture can be very beneficial in a sense that you can teach people good manner and respecting others and this and that. But I don't think that necessarily need to be taught.
No.
Because if you were to follow just nature's way and just bringing the human nature forward and let that play out just naturally without any disruption with the rules and regulations, that it'll just be practiced without being forced.
Yeah. Think about how many things you learned as a child that didn't have to be told. You never had to be told about it. More than you had to be told, right? So just things that you naturally learn about the world that you understand going forward. Like, I remember when I was a young kid, and I had a little dog, and that little dog you play around with, no problem, right? He was Penny. She was a miniature foxy, but then the neighbour's dog was a German Shepherd. I went over there, guns a-blazing, go to play with the German Shepherd. He wasn't hip to the script. He chased me good, you know what I mean, and was yapping at my heels, and I learned a valuable lesson, be careful with some dogs, you know what I mean? Mum and Dad never had to tell me, watch that dog next door. They just let me just run wild around the backyard and just do my thing, and that's how I learned the valuable lesson, There were no fences back in that day. We're talking old school here, the 80s. So, you learn lessons like that without having to be told. I mean, you don't need a set of morals and this and that to understand a German Shepherd. Some German Shepherds' natures are good, some are bad. You got to watch out. They've been raised a little bit funny, some haven't. So, but you learn so many things about the world like that. So you and I have travelled a lot, and you learn actually. From traveling, you learn a lot more about the world just from traveling without having any set of beliefs and doctrine, right? But in your own society, you're learning about how things work, in air quotes, to fall in line with how it works so that you propagate that system, so that longevity of that society and culture continues to move on. And Lao Tzu's saying, pull the brakes on that, turn the car around and go in reverse, you've gone the wrong way. If you're going head along with that system, then you're going to suffer accordingly, because the morality itself is excluding one half of the world. You're only looking at the so-called good of what you perceive as good according to your culture, and you are erasing what you perceive as bad. And we have to be clear here that what certain cultures perceive as good and bad differs among cultures, right? So what America thinks is right and good, maybe the Middle East don't think is right and good. It's completely opposite. They have a different way of thinking. Who is universally right? See? That becomes a thing. And obviously a lot of people in America think they're universally right, and that becomes the mentality around the world, where they're trying to promote their set of beliefs or their form of democracy on other places, and their form of secularism on other places. And that's why Lao Tzu said that's all hypocritical, and you need to really distance yourself from that sort of way of thinking.
Yeah, from that place, you can only cause more harm to humanity, right? You create more separation between people and more conflicts, more problem, and it's just gonna never be solved.
No.
Yeah.
And if you're following the way of nature, there's no conflict. Like what Robert Jiu was saying to Confucius, like in the age of Shen Nung, we didn't have an idea of good or bad, right and wrong, and everyone got along shanti, peaceful, you know. And this again, on the deeper level, goes to, on the spiritual level, what Zhuangzi was talking about with the species-specific essence of humans, the Qing, which is our ability to discern between this and that. And this in itself, Confucius believes, is a human flaw, because we don't see life in its wholeness. We see life according to our subjectivity. And when we see life according to our own subjectivity, we create moral rules and standards that equate to what we think is right. And that's what Confucius did right in the beginning, and that's what every other society has done after Confucius, even to today, right? We don't have... It's not an objective perspective of what society is. It's more of a subjective view of what morality should be for certain cultures. And so this ability to discern between this and that creates the illusion of right and wrong, good and bad, he said, she said, all of this nonsense that you go down the line. And that becomes actually part of the mentality and attitude of the culture. If Zhuangzi was alive today, he would choke on his breakfast if he saw what was going on in the world, you know, because like we've just gone head first into that way of thinking of this and that on a subjective level, you know. So that's why he has methods of fasting, mind, and meditation to cleanse that bad habit of this and that. To see, like what in the second chapter says, that life is just an interplay of opposites. But can you see the oneness, the whole reality, or are you focused on creating a world based on one side of the coin as opposed to the other side of the coin?
You know, people have two opposite sides, and they argue or whatever. They're in conflict. But like in the chapter says that in a sense, the one party exists because the other party exists. They're interdependent.
Interdependent, yeah.
Yeah. That's what we are very short-sighted about, right? We are in this side and the other people are on the other side, so that you want to persuade the way you think to the other side, as if that's absolutely right. But that's very short-sighted perspective. Yes. Because they're both interdependent.
Yeah, it's like you hear all these arguments between the left and right in politics, right? And so you often hear leftists going, "Oh, we just need to eradicate right-wingers from the world," and so forth and so on. What do you think, Jason? It's like, well, you can't have left without right. It's a play. Understand, it's a play. You can't have left without right. The reason why you exist in the first place is because there is them. Both are codependent. The reason why you exist is because they exist. If you didn't exist, they wouldn't exist. That's the way it is. But this is too deep. This is on a deeper psychological and spiritual level that they just think it's just woo-woo or some nonsense like this. It's like, no, it's not. You're not looking at it properly. You're not looking at it from an intelligent perspective. Because you know why? Because you're stuck in this subjective view of your group, your party, and that's what brings conflict to the world and actually destroys the world. When you have a position, you've put a flag in the ground, and you've got a position, And you've said, that's it, this is where I stand. And that's not the way of nature. If you have a position in life, you're standing in the wrong place. Because life is ever-changing. And you will never stay in the same place, actually, even if you think you do, you know what I mean? Your view on politics may change. Your view on life may change. Well, actually, I shouldn't say may, it will change.
Yeah.
It may change on a subtle level, or it may change drastically. And that's what people need to understand. See, the thing is, especially in Western cultures, right, we have this absolutist mentality of that this is the way things are. And when you come into contact with the Tao Te Ching and Lao Tzu and Zhuangzi, there's no such thing as absolutist mentality. That just doesn't exist. Because even if you wanted to be absolute about something right now, it's going to change. It doesn't matter. I think this way when I'm 20. Well, you're not going to think that way when you're 40. I mean, like, it's just not going to... I can tell you now, and obviously they're going to get so aggressive and angry because they don't want to accept that, but that's the way it is.
Yeah, just remember how we felt when we travel. Like, we all love traveling, right?
Of course, yeah.
The reason why we like traveling is because you no longer can think exactly the same or behave the same way as you did in your own country or your familiar environment to another country if you were to visit another country, because you physically are in different environment, completely different environment, and you consciously understand that you are in a different place, right? So that if you were to behave exactly the same or say things exactly the same manner as you were doing to that different place, it may be perceived as something rude or inappropriate, right? That's why we often see a lot of people who go to overseas and they are a little bit different. They act a little bit different, a bit more like maybe hesitant, apprehensive about doing something. That is because they're in a different environment. They instantly somewhat not acting as if what they know is absolutely best because they're in a different environment. But so that, because of that reason, I think a lot of people feel the most free when people travel,
exactly.
right? Because you don't have to oppose your own will over other people or other things because it's already foreign to you. So you don't know how things operate, right? So you need to find out, like you were saying about the dog. You need to kind of figure it out as you go, right? So you need to experience that different environment to figure it out, how things work and what's appropriate and what's not, because it's a different culture, different environment. So you learn these things. And in that moment, you'll be like just a blank canvas, even if you're, let's say, age 50 or 60.
Yes.
Because you're in completely different environment. How can you, you can be same if you're kind of bold person, but most people are not.
No, most people are not that outrageous.
So that, I think more we have experienced like that, and longer you have that kind of experience and visiting actually completely different culture to culture, and experience different culture directly firsthand, and you kind of develop this kind of trust in the world. Why? Because you didn't know anything about that place, right? But you kind of jumped in cold, and you learn as you go, and you did learn as you go, right? And you have these experiences, and from place to place, different cultures, different language and people, and you know that it's okay. Like, I thought what I knew was the best, and that was the absolute way, but actually, the way they do things is fine. It works pretty good too. Like this, you kind of naturally open up your mind a little bit, so then you begin to trust how things are, and you begin to trust your actually natural, the instinctual feeling as well, right? And you become much more intuitive to yourself and the environment, and you develop this different kind of the brain in your mind.
Yes.
That's been dormant for a very long time because of our indoctrination from the same environment, living for way too long.
Yeah. Well, that's why the yogi never stays in one place too long, because the yogi sees the world like how you were saying. The yogi travels the world, wanders the world, experiences societies, but doesn't live there for too long.
Yeah.
So he doesn't understand like the subtle nuances. He sees it for what it is. He sees the subtleness of the society, like the humility of the people, and so forth and so on. He doesn't get into like all of the other stuff like the politics and this and that. He just sees it for what it is, and he develops a great trust of the world because he moves through life like that. And that relates also to Zhuangzi's free and easy wandering. Free and easy wandering can be thought in both ways. Free and easy wandering in your mind, but also in life. You're just free and easy. You're not your energy is not blocked. You're just moving with life because you have a deep trust of life, and that's just the way it is. You know what I mean? And then, like you said, it opens up that we could say like that natural part of our mind.
Yes, it's like a kind of the faculty that we all have, but it's been dormant for a very long time, and we didn't even know we had that kind of intelligence.
Well, that's wu-wei, right? That's the non-doing, effortless action, intelligent, spontaneous part of ourselves that we don't access because we're told to control life. But then once we sort of let go and we just sort of move with life as like a leaf moving down a river, then we reignite that deep trust that we have, that we didn't even know was there. We didn't know that faculty was within our mind, but it's always there. What's not always there is this element of that we can control everything. That's not always there, because what you see in life is that you control Jack. You know what I mean? You don't control anything. So you control just a small bandwidth of life, but you don't control the greater totality. It's better to be that leaf moving down the river. And that's actually, that's the nature of a Taoist, right? The nature of a yogi is or a nature of a Shaiva sadhu is to move with life like that. Not get your mind entangled with the cultural tenets and the political aspects of a culture. You disentangle from that and you live freely. That's what a Jivan Mukta is, right? Liberated in this life means their mind is not entangled with all of these cultural and social aspects that supposedly are supposed to define who we are, but they don't, and they will change over time. So it's better to be naturally who you are and disentangle from all of that nonsense and be a Jivan Mukta. Shanti, Shanti.
Yeah, exactly. We just need to actually give somewhat a bit of an effort to undo all these things, right?
Yes.
It's like almost in our brain and neural system is also the muscle, is working as a muscle memory. So we need to kind of undo that pattern of movement in your brain, and then connecting to different net of muscle, so that you open up a different part of your mind,
yes,
which is more intuitive side and more trusting these things, and need to give very like kind of conscious effort is very important.
Yeah, like you need to have bodhicitta, like in Buddhism, you need to put a bit of spiritual practice into it. But like in general, once you let go of the banks of the river and just allow the Tao to move you along, you will go where you need to be. But you have to get out of that controlling aspect. You have to get out of, and you have to unravel all of this socialization. This is why you and I know best. But when people travel to places like India or Thailand, they feel a great relief because there's less rules and regulations. And the irony is in some sense, there's less crime than places that, and this articulates Lao Tzu's point, right? When you create a system a set of morals that is strictly on the good, so to speak, you instantly create its opposite. And you're ignoring another aspect of life. And so, places like Thailand and India and Nepal, all these sort of places, sure, there's still some laws, some rules, but it's very, it's loose, And so,
Law.
Yeah, laws with a wink. And so what happens is, like, as you know, that when most people, they say if they travel to Thailand, they never want to leave, because there's a sense of ease about people and a humility, and people aren't wound up with too many rules and regulations, and there's actually not much conflict within the people, even though that, you could say now that there's some protests in Thailand, but those protests are different to the protests in America, so to speak, and there's always been those sorts of protests in Thailand, but they usually fizzle out. But in general, the mentality doesn't change. And, it's, as we know from living in Thailand and in India, that a lot of people that we know come and visit us, they're like, oh man, how can I live here? Because there's this relief that they don't have to worry about the tax man, and all of these things that
you are free from all those responsibilities,
and free from all of if I do that, what about the cops? And not that they're doing anything wrong, but there's always this paranoia especially within Western society, that because the society's built on that, you better not do something wrong or we're going to get you, where places like Thailand and India, and these are more Taoist, where it's just just let life sort of have its way, and if something really terrible happens, then we'll clamp down. But if, for example, if you're riding a motorbike with no motorbike license, the copper might just go, just don't let anyone else hear,
Yeah, not no more. This time, okay.
This time,
no
okay,
more.
no more. Yeah. So it's very human, right? It's humane. It's humane. So,
yeah.
But that's what happens when you taper back these morals, and that Lao Tzu was talking about, that Confucius was trying to propagate.
And this controlled lifestyle that we have in most of the world is, I think, also diminishes a creativity in individual as well, I think, because society is set up in very specific way, right? And you actually have to follow. There is no other option, so that your life becomes in this very molded shape, molded by someone else, not yourself, because you can't live otherwise. You can't go against those frame, so to say. And you have to live in that frame so that you can't be expendable, so to say. You don't have much room to be creative with your life, right? Whereas in Southeast Asia, India, and places like that, is because it's a very open place, and there's not much strict rules and things like that. Even if there are, people can always communicate with each other and things like that. And so that allows people a lot of space to fully live their life as creatively as they want, right? That's why how many times we see there are great artists who are from the Western country but settle in Thailand and do their things. It doesn't matter they're known people or not, but they just enjoy doing what they do, and they live life creatively, And the creatively doesn't mean that you do arts and things like that. You just live differently in your own style, not just having a 9-to-5 job, have family, have kids, and look after family, and this and that. This is very conventional, and that is not the only way of living life.
Yeah, your life becomes a work of art. The way you live becomes a work of art, right? And art, for example, if you are a creative person, you would know this, that if there's too many rules imposed on what you're doing as an artist, you can never express yourself purely. The naturalness of yourself can't come out purely. That would be like me imposing a lot of rules on myself as a writer. I shouldn't talk about that, or I shouldn't talk about this. Or, maybe I should talk about Taoism and New Age and not stick to the tradition, which is what a lot of people probably want on this YouTube channel, but that's not what they're going to get. So I'm not going to impose all of these rules on myself, which would be like selling out. You'd be almost like selling out to, appease a crowd or to appease a certain society. That look, I'm writing, but I'm still within the rules, and I'm not bending the rules. And it's like that's not creativity. look at most great musicians. Most great musicians step outside of the boundary of conventional thought, right? So they break the rules even of music itself.
Yes.
You know, so...
And that's how things grow.
That's how things grow.
And I mean, with the current generation, it's becomes way too many rules, and too many people come out and say their own agenda and morality and things like that. And those people get hurt a lot, and they can become very loud because of the social media platforms and whatnot. So it seems like there are much more rules than ever. Right? So in hindsight, that creates less valuing real artists, right? Not crediting real craftsmanship. There's no real authentic creativity much anymore. See how this is kind of reflecting even the current situation around the world and culturally?
Yes, yes.
Culture is so-called what's trending. What's trending is not culture. That's not artistic. That's you may be able to say that maybe a bit creative because it might be something unique, but that's not artistic.
No.
That doesn't resemble that, how the sacred humanity in the art form. That's real art to me.
Yes.
And from that we have a real authentic culture, just like traditional culture still lives on, right? So that, like, especially contemporary time right now is because there's just, so many rules and regulations, and so many different come out and say what's right and what's wrong, and to like a loud voices are out there, and that's not really like valid, really. But people actually listen to these people, right? So that they become more hesitant to their, to expand their creativity. Why? Because they worry about the public perception. And that stops the true creativity. And what stops the real comedy as well, just having a joke. The light joke, light humor is not almost allowed anymore. You have to think before you say, right? Like, because people have these strong opinions on things, and you need to watch what you say really nowadays. Joking is not really allowed anymore. I believe that comedy and joke itself is part of art, because in the 80s, 90s, or before that, these great comedians come out and say things, and they're saying the right things about the world, and they make fun of it, and nothing wrong with having fun, right? That's a part of human nature. We need to have a good laugh as well.
Yeah. But there's nothing wrong with humor. The people are too uptight. It's too ridiculous. This would be like, this is again Zhuangzi's point, right? The reason why most of the Zhuangzi text is a parody is because of what you said. The moral hypocrite creates a society like what you're saying, what we have today, where humor is dead. That's what a moral hypocrite creates, because they have a politically correct view of the world, and then that's it. If you step out of line with that, you are cancelled, or you are outcast from humanity. It makes no sense, because like naturally we like to have a laugh. It's our nature. We like to have a laugh, and there's nothing wrong with that. If there was no comedians in the world, it'd be a pretty dull world, right? Thank God for the comedian. Shout out to all comedians in the world. That's great. You know what I mean? Zhuangzi's just there like this. But if Zhuangzi was on social media and he saw all these social justice warriors, he'd be doing facepalm emojis everywhere like this. You know what I mean? So it's outrageous. But that's the environment at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah.
So one of the parts we haven't talked about in this chapter is the mind of the master, right? So just to like articulate a little bit, you read like sort of what we've been talking about with morality. So like where you have in the first two lines, you have under heaven all can see beauty as beauty only because there is ugliness. All can know good as good only because there is evil, right? And then it goes on to describe, how long or short depend on each other and so forth and so on. And then it goes on to say after that, therefore the wise go about doing nothing, wu-wei, and teaching no talking. And so, first of all, because under heaven, so here, we see beauty as beauty, there is ugliness, right? So we make a distinction, as like what Zhuangzi says, with this ability to see this and that. We make a distinction, we say that's beautiful, so we create a standard, which then creates its opposite, right? Creates ugliness. And so all can know good as good only because there is evil. So we've created good, so there is evil. And so we've created standards, right? But there are an interplay of opposites, right? So the short and long is, front and back, voice and sound harmonize. But the problem there becomes that when we create human standards or social standards that create something as beautiful and something as ugly. So, for example, as we know, within advertising, a slim woman will always get picked over, say, a bit heavy-set woman, right? But we created that that beauty standard. Now, is that based on innate attractiveness? Then that's a whole other story that we have to talk about, right? And is it healthy for the heavier woman to be heavy? And we know it's healthier to be not to be fat, like. So that's a whole other argument. But the problem is that we've created a standard itself, and so Lao Tzu is saying then, therefore the wise go about doing nothing and teaching through no talking. So essentially that you have to come back to silence in this matter, right? You have to come back to silence and understand that you can't go around trying to change the way people think and society itself. That would be just as bad as Confucius, right? Because Confucius went around trying to change the world according to his own view. So you can't essentially go around as a Taoist and go around changing people according to the way of nature. People have to come across the way of nature. It's not something that is... Taoism is not not a doctrinal philosophy. Like, it's not a set of doctrines. You could say that to understand Taoism, you need to read the Tao Te Ching and the Zhuangzi, but they are not like set books like the Bible or the Quran or something like this, right? It's completely different. So,
I mean, for example, if Lao Tzu or Zhuangzi were still alive, for example, what would they say about the current world? I don't think they would say anything about it. They'd just say it's just a movement of nature.
yes.
Just let it take its course and just you are already part of it, whether you know it or not. So that to live from a place where you know it or you don't know it, that's your choice. Or if you don't know it, it's not a choice. You'll be living in kind of very physical, limited world.
Yes.
But nevertheless, if Zhuangzi and Lao Tzu were alive, I think they would say there's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
I think that's what they would say. It was part of it. Whatever is not suitable for nature and the universe, it'll die away naturally.
Yes.
And if it's aligned with the law of nature, then it'll survive. It's nothing that you go about and tell people what to do and try to change the world.
Yeah, if they were like our own personal psychologist and we were a bit social justice warrior, then they would say to us that, oh, no, because they lived 2,500 years ago, they'd be like, oh, no, this is just an old game. This is just one version of the game. This will fizzle out and another game will arise. But what are you doing? Are you running around opposing the game, which is contributing to the game in a subtle sense, and promoting your own version of the same game? You know, you're just changing the rules according to your own subjective opinion. You're not fundamentally cutting the tree at its root. You're just pruning the branches.
That's right.
And you're trying to mold the tree according to how you see it. And that's what social justice warriors do. That's what all of these, people these days. And actually, it's not that that's a new phenomenon. It's always been around. So people are trying to mold or prune the tree according to their way of thinking. Where Lao Tzu and Zhuangzi just cut the tree at its root and say, don't play the game at all. Don't play the game at all. Remain shanti, do nothing. Allow the world, the nature of human civilization, the nature of human civilization. If you look at, and remember, Lao Tzu and Zhuangzi are looking at human civilization here like a plant. And you just let it grow and decay and grow and decay and just run its course. But you don't engage your mind in this. You have to practice vairagya, so a renunciation of worldliness, and not get your mind entangled in all of this nonsense that we call human civilization. And so you have to really refrain from that. So where Lao Tzu says actually teaching no talking, he's not essentially saying that you just keep your yap shut. He's also, that can be translated as teaching no other form of knowledge or set of beliefs, is what he's saying. People don't need more, they need less. So if you come along with this, right, and you say, I've got the Tao Te Ching, I know the way of nature and this and that, I mean, you become just like a Bible salesman then, you know what I mean? You're just a Bible thumper, a Bible basher, and you're telling people you've got the way. That's definitely not what they need. They don't need more, they need less. They need to unravel themselves first before understanding also this too sometimes, you know. So it doesn't mean just teaching no talking. It does mean both remaining silent in not just a physical sense, but in a psychological sense. So in a psychological sense, and also remaining silent in the sense that you're not promoting another set of beliefs for other people to take on board.
Yeah, otherwise, I mean, you may promote a good idea, which is like Taoist idea and whatnot, but the way you approach is exactly the same as what the other people are doing.
Exactly.
And in the other people's eyes, you are just an individual who wants to just persuade that agenda.
Yeah.
To themselves, so it doesn't look any different. You're just trying to push your own agenda.
Yes. And you need to have no agenda.
Yeah, exactly.
That's Zhuangzi and Lao Tzu's point, is you have no agenda. If you have no agenda, the Tao can make use of you. And in a roundabout way, that's actually how people change the world. That's why we remember Lao Tzu, Zhuangzi, Buddha, Shankara, so forth and so on, all of those greats. Why do we remember them thousands of years' time, but you don't remember a politician from the 400s? Do you know what I mean?
Or a king
or a king. Yeah, they're long gone. That just become dust in the ether. You know what I mean? So, but you remember them because they didn't essentially go about trying to change the world, and coincidentally, they did change the world. You know.
But the thing is, that's only the truth and what can remain forever and ever, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, when we say that, like, stop worrying about politics and there's no point you being opinionated in this and that, and maybe a lot of people may react like, oh, what about these problems that's going on around the world, and like, what about the problem that in my neighborhood and this and that. Initially, you still may worry about things like that. It could be just out of pure innocent intention and innocent reason why,
Sure.
right? You want to help people and this and that. But at the end of the day, whatever you think doesn't really matter, actually. Has no effect on how it will pan out. What you think is what you think to you, and how things gonna work is two completely different story. And I don't think a lot of people understand that. As if like I told you this story that one of the individual I heard talking that how she's so against Mardi Gras, for example. But whether she agrees or not, that's just gonna
happen anyway. Yeah, it doesn't matter.
So why do you think your opinion on that is so important to be heard by other people? This mentality, I don't really understand it. It's almost pointless to have an opinion in that case. And actually, a lot of things are like that. But if you were to step back and try to look at the bigger picture, that you kind of come to an agreement that actually doesn't really matter, I have an opinion or not. Because at the end of the day, things will go on as it should and as it will, and the outcome will be whatever will be, no matter how you think about it. So that do you want to emotionally really deeply involve into it, which has no effect, or do you want to rise above and see the bigger picture and then not lean against this or that and live by nature's way, you know?
Well, that's overestimation, see. That individual overestimates their opinion, overestimates their subjective view of the world. And that's one of the core problems, right? And that's what Taoism exposes, because Taoism is a path of ordinariness. It's a path of non-specialness. But what happens when we create a society that, especially what we have now, and also what, you know, if we look at it back in Confucian era as well, is that it can be individually geared, and so there's this idea of feeling special, you know. And as Taoism articulates, you are no more special than an ant. You have your place in the world. There's no doubt humans have their place in the cosmos, but it's not at a higher place than an ant. And so this really pulls you down off that pedestal. And so that sort of individual that has such a you know, a subjective opinion of their view of what that Mardi Gras shouldn't happen, for example, they overestimate their opinion because they, on a subtle level, feel that they are special. And what the Tao Te Ching does, what the Zhuangzi text does, is it pulls you off that pedestal and brings you back to earth. And it says, you're not special, fella. You're not special. And so why are you walking around with all of these opinions rattling around in your skull about what you think should happen in the world and so forth and so on? That is the crux of the problem. Because we've got everyone walking around saying, this is how it should be, that's how it should be. And you think conflict is not going to happen? Of course it's going to happen. It can only happen from that perspective. And so that's part of the problem. And so we've got to cleanse out this mentality that we think we are special. And we've built a whole culture on that, right? The Hollywood version of life and the American version of life is on extraordinariness and not ordinariness. But the Taoist view and the Eastern view in general is on being ordinary and understanding that, you know, I'm very fortunate to, you know, hopefully I get 100 years of life here, maybe a little bit more, but I'm very fortunate to have this life. But I'm not going to assume that this 100 years is going to define the cosmos's existence. It's a blip. It's a blip. And we overestimate ourselves that this 100 years that we're going to live is going to be, we're going to change the world. We're going to become a Buddha. And we're going to, like, you know, but not in the Buddhist sense, we're going to be like with the iron fist, you know, like, hey, like,
make an impact to the world.
Yeah, make an impact. And so this whole text, in Taoist philosophy in general, is about pulling that rug from underneath your feet, dragging you off the pedestal and saying, don't overestimate your opinion. Don't overestimate your viewpoint of the world. That's how we got in trouble in the first place. And, you know, we encountered this in the YouTube comment section where people overestimate their opinions about what you and I are doing, about the knowledge we're teaching. And it's like, and you and I are just dismissive about a lot of these comments because there's nothing to engage with. There's nothing to comment on because it's like, well, if you don't get it, you don't get it. You know, I mean, because there's nothing you say. Like, it's a stranger in the comments. I mean, we don't know them personally, really. So it's better to be dismissive than engage because you don't know where that person might be psychologically or even if they're a real person. It could be like a troll in a troll farm or something. You never know.
Troll farm.
Because there are troll farms. There are farms. They call them troll farms. Anyway, but so you just have to get out of that. You know, that person should not have an opinion on if there's a Mardi Gras or not. If someone said Mardi Gras is happening this weekend, that's great. That should be your response. That's great. Because there's nothing else to say about it. It doesn't matter whether if you're a Christian and you don't like gay people, or even if you're a person who likes gay people. It's great either way because it's just happening. Yeah, it's life. And we're out of touch. This is what happens when you overestimate yourself. You disconnect from just enjoying life itself, and you don't know how to have fun.
you become too uptight. You start to think yourself too seriously.
Too seriously, right? Yeah. I had this individual comment once on you and I up on the Annapurna Pass, Throngla Pass, and they were like, why do you have to travel all this way to... You don't need to travel all this way to understand. It's like, I really don't understand the comment. Like, again, I wrote to them and I was saying like, are you serious? Like this, you did, like this triggered you. Like, but they don't understand that this is we're just enjoying life, just having fun. It's like what Watts said in relation to Zen. When you come to that deep understanding, you live your life with a certain zest and joyousness. And that's how you and I have always been. You know, like, and it's that analogy in Zen, right? Before enlightenment, carrying wood and water. After enlightenment, carrying wood and carrying water. Life goes on, but you carry on with a certain zest and joyousness. And you can enjoy things actually a lot better because the aesthetic beauty of the world is revealed to you. You know, you see the intrinsic beauty in the world and everything.
It's almost like you have different eyes. You peel your layer of your eyes, and you would do the same routine as you were doing before, but you were different. You were at a different place.
Yeah, of course. That's what it is.
That kind of comment kind of makes me a bit sad because I find this a lot with a lot of people, especially maybe younger generation people, that they defend their own way of living is as if like a kind of the best way to live. But I mean, we know a lot about having different experiences, especially like walking in that highest circuit in the world.
Throngla Pass.
Yeah, we were walking
days.
for 18 days, about 230 kilometers, and roughly like short days we walked like 2 hours. That was only I think 1 or 2 days really. But most days we walked like 6+ hours, I think. Yeah. And that moment that we had when we were trekking is just something that you can just kind of bring it back into your memories straight away for me, because I mean you're physically, mentally so exhausted, but there's no other way but walking. But after a while, the tiresome and exhaustion is actually kind of forgotten because something else take over you, and you just keep walking. Bags are heavy, and feet are hurt, and it's so exhausted. But you know you're in this nature, and you're amongst its other trekkers, Nepalese or many foreigners, and you know meeting nice people in nature, and you are completely empty in a good way. You're at a different place, and that sort of your mind is completely kind of stopped thinking. You're fully absorbing what's going on around you and the very movement that you're doing, which is walking. And it's a complete tranquility that you can't manufacture from any other experience in our daily life. And that's very shame that people actually think like that. It's very sad because that kind of experience gives you a lot more teachings than what you can learn from 10 years in university. You know?
Oh, of course, yeah.
Because you can only learn that from having that kind of experience.
It's a form of sadhana, right?
Definitely.
It's a form of sadhana. Like, that was an 18-day sadhana for you and I. That was like, you put your body and mind in a situation it's never been in. You go to the highest you've ever been. You have no oxygen.
You go through some challenging moments.
You go through some challenging moments. But then after it's a great boon, you know what I mean? And I don't know why people make those sorts of comments. It's really strange. I don't know what their version of spirituality is. I think they want people to become just like a stone Buddha. Because that individual's comment was like, for someone who speaks like about the inner world a lot, you seem to go to a lot of places. Yeah, I'm a human. I'm I'm not at odds with my own humanity.
Yes.
You are at odds with your own humanity. I enjoy traveling and embracing new cultures because I see the beauty in the world. You don't see, obviously, the beauty in the world. You have made an analytical perspective of how life should be. If you're interested in spirituality, then you should just sit like this all day.
Yeah,
And it's like, you've obviously never been in a monastery, you've never been in an ashram, because that's not how it is.
that individual definitely has that very specific image of being spiritual person. That's why that
It's a materialistic view, right?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And your experience is in conflict with his version of that image, so that he or she makes that sort of comment. Yeah.
You're missing out on so much on life, and that's not the spiritual view. Like if you're interested in Taoism or Buddhism or Hinduism, whatever, then the whole ethos of those traditions was built on people moving, on people walking around and embracing new cultures, going for sadhana up in the Himalayas and Arunachala and Bodh Gaya and places like this. And I love it. I mean, I'm just dismissive. I'm really dismissive when I see those comments. I actually, like you said, I feel sorry for some of those people because, and it may be a young person too, because they don't understand that, life is good, man. Life is great. Like you're thinking that life is some sort of negative thing. Life is wonderful once you, like you said, peel the layers of your eyes back and you see the beauty in life and that aestheticness. And they talk about that a lot in all of the traditions, right? Once, like in Zen Buddhism, they say that life carries on with a certain joyousness and zest. You're like fully embraced and engaged in life, and not in an attached way, but in a way that it's grand.
That's right. Yeah, I remember. I mean, like, you remember how I struggled up in high camp, going up to high camp, which is 4,900 meters high. And finally, I got up there, and the people who were working, we were struggling, breathing, just sitting down, having a soup.
Yeah.
But there are people cooking food and running around, and these Nepalese people, they just like, I'm like, how do they do it? And
Dalbat power.
and those people go up to that high pass, which is nearly 5,400 meters high. Get there very early because to set up a tea shop to sell the tea for people who are going through, right? But when you get to 5,400, man, you don't even know you're alive or not. You're just there. You're just completely blank, right? Like, oh, let's just take some photos and let's get the hell down. I need some oxygen. It's a bit like that. But these Nepalese people, like, they just bloody strong people, strong people, and like you learn a lot from
that experience.
That experience, and like I said, in the high pass, you're like really hungry. There's not much food to eat, and when the small apple costs like $2, literally, then you realize how how much you should be grateful of things, right?
Yes.
And then I remember that's why when we come down, I remember let's eat as much as we want, drink whatever we want to drink, and this and that, because you realize how things can be very precious and fragile as well.
Those two young guys that were working at the tea shop at 5,400 at the pass, I remember you and I were there for half an hour and I couldn't feel my hands.
Yeah.
I couldn't move my hands, but I couldn't feel them. And I was thinking, like, these boys are up here for 12 hours a day. Yeah. And I was thinking, like, man, they got some inner strength.
Some, like, super lungs.
Super lungs, like, but that's Dalbat power 24 hours, isn't it? Like, that's the Nepali way.
Fully.
But that's, you have to move with a bit of that zest and joyousness in life, and you appreciate life itself. And that's part of the spiritual path. It's not about, it's crept in because Eastern philosophy went to the West and people analytically scrutinize it. And, I saw Alan Watts or, whatever spiritual person you think that they're, supposed to be like a stone Buddha. I saw them doing this, and doesn't that contradict what they talk about? No, it contradicts the way you see it. That's what it contradicts. They don't have any of those sorts of projections of what it means to be spiritual. You do. And as we have explained on this podcast numerous times, spirituality is about being ordinary, not extraordinary. And you and I don't have a problem with traveling, don't have a problem with staying home, we don't have a problem with eating at home or going out to eat or whatever. It's all good because it's all life. And once you crack your head and you understand that psychology of free and easy wandering, then you're at the doorstep of what the Tao Te Ching is talking about. So in talking about that, like, the joyousness, the zest, the aesthetic beauty of life that's intrinsically there. In the second chapter, it goes a little bit more into like the master's mind, right? Like as it says, the 10,000 things rise and fall without cease. So there's this understanding that life is coming and going, we are coming and going, everyone listening and watching is coming and going.
Nothing lasts.
Nothing lasts. Get used to it, that's the way things are. And so then it goes on to say, creating yet not possessing, working yet not taking credit. Work is done and then forgotten, therefore it lasts forever. It's ironic when you talk about this text, right? Lao Tzu, if you think of Lao Tzu as a historical figure, the guard was saying, bro, come on, give me something, you know what I mean? Like, I know you're a smart dude. And so he's kind of like goes in accord with the last two lines, right? Work is done then forgotten, therefore it lasts forever. And then we still have this. Lao Tzu just chilled. He was just like, see you, man, whatever. And he was like, dummies, they just don't get it. And so he went away. And those last four lines are in accord with, therefore the wise go about doing nothing. So we're talking about wu-wei here, right? And we're also talking about nishkarma karma in the Bhagavad Gita, when Krishna explains to Arjuna, you need to act without being attached to the fruits of your action. Now, this is a psychological state that, a lot of people who have never experienced it just don't get it, because they don't understand. They kind of know wu-wei and nishkarma karma, but they don't quite, they've never experienced it. So it's kind of like something that they can sort of explain because they've heard about it in these texts, but they've never experienced it personally. But if you have, then you would understand that when your life is like zhuangzi, like free and easy wandering, and you're in accord with wu-wei, effortless action, non-doing, intelligent spontaneity, then your life has a certain sort of flow about it, but you're not like attached to what's happened before. You are in accord with the river, and you're just moving with the river as one. And the important thing is here, not in the firm sense of a person, because it's the person who attaches to what they've done. That's why it says working yet not taking credit. How can you not take credit? Well, you've loosened your grip on who you are. You loosened your grip on who you are. That's who we need in the world. That's what Lao Tzu is explaining here. This is who the wise are. They don't have a strong sense of personhood, and so they move with the river as one. The Tao is just using them as a vessel. Even though you can sit there and have a conversation with them and this and that, but their nature is very humble and compassionate and forgiving and humorous, and they're carefree, right? Carefree, the free and easy wandering of zhuangzi. And that's what it is. And that's, a lot of people come into accord with this if they have a craft or you've experienced it as a musician, I've experienced it as a writer, but this is more so also, it's got to go outside of the craft, and it's got to become a mentality in everyday life, because the Tao Te Ching is a life philosophy, right? It's about creating that effortlessness, that the non-doing arises because it's the person who does. But this is the idea of, when nothing is done, everything is done, right? Which is another thing, like in the third chapter, it says, if nothing is done, then all will be well. It says like that in the third chapter, which we'll get into the third chapter in the next episode, but is an extension of that way of thinking. So you're not this person, you're not going around conquering the world, and you don't have a firm sense of self, because once you have a firm sense of self, that's where all subjectivity and, you know, agendas and beliefs and that come from. Where Lao Tzu and Zhuangzi are saying that if you down-regulate that sense of self, doesn't mean that you don't know how to communicate and have a conversation. Of course, you don't lose your intelligence or your mental faculties, but you have there's a different power at your base that's guiding your life now, and its power becomes your power. That's what De is, right? That's virtue. Its power becomes your power.
I like that how you say it's a psychological state.
Yes.
That is not something that you try to be that way, or you try to induce it. It's at a different level. You're psychologically, you're at a different level, more elevated. We see this a lot with anyone who are famous or not famous. They are skillful and creative at something, and they're very good at it. But there are a lot of people who want to take all the credit, and there are also people who don't really care about their own fruit of their labor, right? And something inside of us that we have more pull towards the other group of people who don't take credit for it, right? Because there is a humanness to it. There is that humble attitude, and it's something much more than themselves, kind of feeling. We feel more, they're more pulled to that kind of mindset, right? Yes. And that's something that we all need to work on, right? Like we did something good, like, look at me, like we all can be like this, but eventually we want to be out of that state of mind, because in that way you can't be the best version of yourself. You cannot reach your potential, I don't think, in a way, the spiritual potential. You know, if you're in a position that you're a leader, it won't make you a great leader. You might be just a boss, like a bossy leader, but you're not going to be the real, authentic leader amongst other people, right? So that the psychological level that we need to get to is something that we need to always remind ourselves.
Yeah, if you want to really know about that psychological state, become a writer and write books. Because no one cares about books anymore, so you just keep writing. And I'm only joking there a little bit, but we know, like, I've also been in contact with people that have said, why don't you promote, the science and practice of humility anymore? It's like, bro, that's like 8 years ago. I mean, time's gone, bro. It's there. Like, you leave that work do its thing, and it's time to move on. That's the path of like a craftsman, right? Like you make something and you move on. That's the way it is. You don't sit around promoting it every day and every day. That's not how it is. Like, that may be how it is in the pop music industry, for example, but that's not how it is in most genuine crafts, So
let the book speaks for itself.
It speaks for itself, right?
I mean, book is out there. People can get it from anywhere around the world. If you can get it in Bangladesh, you can get it anywhere, right?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And so you don't have to go out and.
No, you don't have to go out and promote it. It's just that work is what it is, and it does its thing. And that's especially what I've learned as a writer is that and the good thing is, because books aren't popular, it's kept me humble, because books don't sell a lot and so forth and so on. But people who read them are very appreciative, and they gain a lot from the work.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we are learning with the podcast and your work and books and whatnot. We may not reach large audience at the moment, but the people who do like your work and the podcast and whatnot, they're really, really appreciating, which is...
and very genuine people.
Yeah, that's right. That's really good.
Shout out to everyone. Love all you guys.
It's not just a watch 5-minute clip and forget about it. It's not like that. It's really... For some people, the content and the books become kind of life-changing lesson, right? And that's really good.
Yeah, well, in getting back to that mentality, it's about, like, So if you have a mentality of like you're just moving through life and you're not attached to all of these things and you're not taking credit for this and that, that's also a better person to be around as well, right? Like, because if you're around an egomaniac, for example, an egomaniac is always taking credit for everything. They want to get their ego stroked all the time, and they usually discard anyone who doesn't stroke their ego. So they keep their circle with yes men and so forth and so on. We see this all the time, right? Especially with famous people. But most people are not famous, and most people are very ordinary and genuine people and good people. And so in being so, that means that to understand this master's mind, we have to just sort of like just move with the river, and just whatever life or however life presents itself is the way life is for you. And if it's a certain way that you don't like, you need to understand that the direction of the river will change eventually. Let's have a look at the pandemic, for example, right? The current pandemic. A lot of people are suffering in the pandemic because of, obviously financial situations, being locked up all the time, and I can sympathize with all that. A lot of people aren't highlighting enough the psychological problems that lockdown and the way society is at the moment has produced, which needs to be talked about a lot more. And there's a lot of problems, we could get into all that. But the thing is, from a spiritual perspective, the Tao Te Ching, what it teaches us and what the Master's Mind teaches us here is just this process is happening. Now, you can fight it and you can have an opinion on how it is, but, you can go out and do whatever you want, but you'll probably just end up in jail, you know what I mean, if you're going out fighting and fighting the cops and this and that. And I know that may seem unfair, but that's the way it is. And so from a higher spiritual perspective, it's about understanding the situation, but also, most importantly, understanding the way that you are interacting with the situation. How are you interacting and how are you feeling according to the situation? That's what Lao Tzu and Zhuangzi would explain to us, because that's what's more important. Obviously, there is some financial constraints on people. That's going to have a certain bearing on people. There's some sociological constraints through lockdown and so forth and so on. So that's going to have a psychological effect on people. So it's about understanding the way you are in the situation and understanding that, but also having a trust that this won't last forever. Now, how long it's going to last, that's nobody knows. But it will not last. You can be sure about that. You can trust that. And so you need to have that trust, that unending trust that actually is at the core of Wu-Wei. The reason why the master says that, to do nothing and no talking is because what that does when you practice that is that inculcates a trust in you that's unnerved. So it can just go on and you'll trust life. In other religions they say have faith, right? Faith is probably a bad term for trust. It's like a second-hand term. What they really mean is trust. So you trust that this process is going to end, and you may come out better or worse. However life expresses itself, but you just have to have that trust, and that's what Wu-Wei inculcates. So when you understand that, not interfering with the world and allowing things to run their course, doing the work, not being attached to the work, and understanding that all work will get done in time, then that gives you this strength, this inner trust. And that's what we need in the world, right? Because once you lack the inner trust, then you begin to fight the current. You begin to swim against the river. And once you swim against the river, what happens? You suffer, you drown. Fear is produced. There's all of that is. So the Tao Te Ching is a book, as we know, of metaphysical psychology. It's about understanding the metaphysics of the cosmos in relation to your psychology, and how to navigate through life without incurring any harm or incurring harm on others. So.
Yeah, it's very difficult, but it is very important to understand for right at this moment around the world, isn't it? Because we are all in the middle of that process, right? Because we are in it, so we can be short-sighted very easily.
Yes.
so that we get frustrated and having a lot of causing a lot of problems in their private life and whatnot. But if we were to understand that we are going through the process, like you said, this is a part of process, and it's in a sense also individually is a personal psychological process as well, right? You can see it that way as well. So that having that trust that this course will run out eventually, hopefully sooner than later, but it will, right? So that having that trust does give us a lot of hope and strength to go through this time for everybody.
Well, it's like what you were saying before about the Mardi Gras, right? It doesn't matter whether you have an opinion on it or you want to fight it. It's happening. I mean, there is a power of acceptance that we need to understand. And look, a lot of people, especially in Western countries, are the loudest about this situation. But you see in a lot of the poorer nations, they're not. And they are in a far worse situation. And to be honest, we're not hearing a lot about actually the real damage in places like Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, Nepal. Like there's things that the media won't tell you about what's going on there. So you have to put your life into perspective. If you're a person of middle class in the West and this and that, I'm pretty sure you're okay. You know what I mean? But you're okay in the sense that you're going to survive, but it's not your life's not as good, but it's not also as bad as what someone who lives in the third world, who lives on the street and this and that. Man, we're not hearing anything about that stuff. You know what I mean? So what we need is people to have more trust, and just to, like you said, hopefully we overcome the situation sooner rather than later. But also trust that we will overcome it sooner rather than later, and some sort of sanity will prevail on how the world can open up again. Maybe it's going to open up again just with coronavirus as part of the world. We don't know. That's just all speculation. But nevertheless, you have to have that trust that this is the way, this is the situation is happening. And your opinion on it is as much as your friend's opinion on not liking the Mardi Gras. You know what I mean? It's the same because it's meaningless. So instead of having a lot of solidified opinions, work on those opinions, taper those back, and just see your life and how you are feeling towards life, objectively, and spiritually work on yourself.
And again, like we're going through this process, everybody together. You can always choose to look at the positive side as well. At the moment, it doesn't look like it at all, but at the end of the day, it may have a positive effect for everybody in some way, And
we just don't know, do we?
So right now we can't see it.
No.
But once the time goes on, and once we get over this time, hopefully we come up with some positive effect on each individual's life.
They always say hindsight's the son of a gun, right? So Taoist practice, especially in a situation like this, is very important. Understanding the Tao Te Ching, actually studying the Tao Te Ching in this period of time would be a great thing for people. Those who are in lockdown or those who are in a difficult situation. This is a great book to understand during this process. But it's a life manual, right? So it's about understanding any situation. Even when life is good, it's about understanding that in some sense, the version of your life that you feel is good will have probably a dip. Life goes like this, right? You don't just stay up here on the clouds. Yeah. Life has its ebbs and flows. It's how you are interacting with life that determines the quality of life. It doesn't matter about external circumstances. You just won $1 million. You lost $1 million. Yeah. It's how you are interacting with life that determines the quality of the life. And so when you have a perspective of beauty as beauty, then ugliness will be born. But if you have a perspective that life is just this one thing, and you're starting to work on that mentality of this and that, then you begin to see the aestheticness of life, the beauty of life, even in those terrible moments in life, those tough situations. You still see the beauty in that, because you haven't made a distinction between this is good and this is bad. You've got out of that mentality. And so you work and you live in your way regardless of the situation, which is what wu-wei is, right? You're living your way regardless of the situation. You're not attached to the situation or how your life is or will be. You're just living.
So it should be a bit like this: before pandemic, after pandemic, the same.
Same. actually, literally, yeah. Literally, you shouldn't be moved a lot by the rising tides.
Yeah.
But that's a really heightened spiritual state, right? Like that's at the Lao Tzu and Zhuangzi level. That's like at a very heightened spiritual state. Most of us probably aren't at that level, but we can get to that level when we start to work on, like you said, like we were talking about, the working on the this and that mentality of like, you know, you're just focusing on the interplay of opposites and you're not like seeing the world as a whole.
Yeah.
And so you are moved then by the rising tides, you know, so.
Those movements will never go away.
No.
It will always be there. It's
Yes.
just whether you want to pay attention or not, that's your choice.
Exactly. Again, cleanse your mind. Cleanse yourself of all these opinions, all this subjectivity. You may, on a subjective level, disagree with a lot of things in life, but that's affecting your quality of life. It's affecting your ability to have that psychological state of free and easy wandering, which is the goal of Taoism, is to have that mind of free and easy wandering. It doesn't matter what happens in life. You are free and easy. You move about. Your energy is not blocked. That's what happens a lot online, right? Where people are, you see all these strange comments and this and that, but you just know that that person's energy is blocked. They don't have that free and easy wandering psychology. But the goal of Taoism is to have that mind of the master that we talked about in this last part of the chapter 2 on the Tao Te Ching. And that's how we all, well, that's the goal for all of us, is to move with life with this. It's like the Japanese term onsui, right? Onsui means to drift like a cloud and flow like water. And that's the mind of a Taoist, to drift like a cloud and flow like water. You know, this is life, just I'm moving with life. I don't think I'm special, I'm moving with life. And life is expressing itself through me as it needs to. And then I will die, eventually. That's just life. Not attached to this and that, just moving through life, surfing through it. And there's a great freedom in that. A great freedom in that. A lot of people don't think there's a great freedom in that because people have associated with an extraordinary version of reality, and they think freedom equates to having a lot of money, a lot of fame, having respect and notoriety from people. You're a hostage to other people's beliefs, and you're a hostage to materialism. You have to free yourself from that and come back into the mind of Lao Tzu and Zhuangzi.
Well said.
So that's about it, isn't it?
Yeah.
So guys, I hope you enjoyed the second episode of the 81 chapters of the 81 meditations of the Tao Te Ching. And remember to like this content. Remember, drop a comment and let us know what you think about our analysis of the Tao Te Ching. Make sure you share this with your friends if you enjoy the content. And subscribe. So a lot of people say to me, you know, how do you reach a wider audience? And it's kind of, it seems that the algorithm or whatever it is likes and comments and if you share. So if you respect the work that I'm doing on this channel and Guy Young and myself are doing on the podcast, and you have an appreciation for Eastern philosophy and this content, and you would like this to reach the people it needs to reach, then, you know, please think about, you know, dropping a like, a comment, and sharing with your friends. And we love and appreciate you all. And like Guy Young was saying before, we really appreciate all of the audience, and most of the people here are very genuine and sincere. So, you know, we don't take that for granted. So
Definitely.
All right. So guys, we'll see you next week, and have a good day.